Just putting up a quick video as a solution to... Well, I'm just going to make sure my mic set nice and loud. It is. Okay, so it is true my camera's not focused, dropped dead in the middle of the screen. My apologies. Nor is this a high resolution or a high frame rate recording. I just want to show there's a little bit of de-optimization that's happened to this game. It's been a paid for Nvidia optimized title, and Warner previously broke the PC release with apparently for Nvidia cards they stopped the top 3 gigabytes of VRAM being used on your video card. They just had it cull aggressively the game world chunks down, and they must be about 1.5 gigabyte chunks. And it used to be on my card it would hover between 14 gig and 15.5 gig, and I didn't get any judders or issues. I've been running this game for well, approaching years now, and it's been a benchmark title that I've used many times. I'm very familiar with it. I've done literally many hundreds of runs around Hogwarts. Most of them are private videos fed between the AMD driver team and myself. These are the Vanguard drivers, the latest release with Hogwarts ray tracing optimizations in them. But there's a lot about this game I've learnt over time, which is that some of the pixel shaders are generated in-game such that if you have a time of day transition, it can affect your performance. What I'm noticing right now is that they're leaning on, I believe it's part of the Nvidia de-optimization process, but they're now leaning on one of your cores very heavily, such that when I first tweaked this game, running through an area in Hogsmeade, the lowest frame rate I was getting in the game was about 35 frames a second. So rather than having the game swing between 35 and up to 60, which is my TV's frame rate limit or hertz limit, I locked the game to 30 solid. And I guess the problem with my shrunk down version I'm using right now is that it's a little bit hard to see the frame data I've got for the video card in the top of the screen. But it's a little bit irrelevant. What we're looking at is the 4th core along. Essentially it's called core 3, and it is bottlenecking, right? It's hitting flat out. Previously it never used to, but now, usually after a time of day transition or for whatever reason, I get these incredible frame rate lows, and the video card basically sits around doing nothing. It drops down to about 20-30% usage, while something on that core 3 is sorting itself out. And what I found was that by simply forcing the game off that core would still bottleneck to 100%, but it wouldn't impact the game anywhere near as much. So I believe it's possibly something to do with Nvidia ray tracing. We know that Nvidia drivers like to lean on the CPU a lot heavier than AMD drivers. There's no doubt that for some of their physics or some of their additive libraries, they offset the GPU, the difficulty on the GPU by leaning onto the CPU. So what I was having happen previously was that the game was culling its VRAM down from 15 gig down to like 11 gig, and basically jumping between 14 and 11 gig constantly. It's being over aggressive with how it culls the VRAM. But after a couple of passes, usually after a time of day where the pixel shaders need to be generated again, if there's a time of day transition or like mist or something, it'll bog down to basically nothing in frame rate. And I'm running settings a lot lower than I used to be able to run this newly optimized game, which is obviously an Nvidia tech demo for the new cards, is leaning in particular on CPU core 3, and just by turning the game off of that core, it will keep the frame rate higher. Now I think I have to run around a little bit until there's a time of day transition, until there's a missed transition or something such that the game does bog down. I'm hoping that this video will sample it, but I was just playing it without a recording going, and I was getting the frame rates dropping down to 2 and 3 frames a second for chunks of time. And once that had engaged, I continued to run around town, I continued to put up with it, and then I just simply found that by going into Windows and forcing the game off core 3, I got my frame rate back. And at the same spots where it would sometimes drop down, I would still see core 3 jump up to 100% usage, meaning the game was no longer using it, but the game's dependency on that core that was now bogged out no longer happening because I'd forced the game off that core. It wasn't affecting my minimum frame rate anymore. And so the game rate has been very, very smooth now. But I guess I have to create a situation whereby I overburden the game first. And it does seem to happen with time of day transitions. It does seem to be that it keeps culling the VRAM down, but after a while it just comes up with ways to bog it. Right, so it's looking like it's pretty heavily used there, but because we haven't had enough rotation in the VRAM yet to cause the bog down to happen, like it's moving about 4 gig of data in and out of VRAM twice a second. You see it go from 14.5 down to 11, up to 14.5, and then back down to 11. So I can't even imagine how hard my page file / drive is having to fight to keep up with this. I believe it is the page file because I'm not seeing any data being moved. So what might have happened is now that the page file has that data already, it's not happening. If I was to go into the menus and to change a shader setting, be it the quality of my shadows or the quality of ambient occlusion, I would force it to rebuild all my shaders again, and it would create a situation in game where it would be hitting my VRAM extra hard. It would be hitting the generation on my GPU to generate those shaders again. Alright, so I just don't think it's going to happen. Look, I've only got a limited amount of time to record before my camera card cuts out. To be honest, I'm fatigued. I've been doing this all day. That is updating this game and doing some benchmark testing. And it's very frustrating, very tiring. But you can see the core I'm referring to is the 4th core along. So it's the one just underneath where my CPU is labelled there, basically under where the word 100% would be written. Again, I understand that the resolution of the recording is so low that seeing the actual text there isn't viable, but because they're animating graphs, being able to see the actual graphs should be viable. But I'm just trying to create a situation where it bogs down, because once it bogs down, it's so easy to see that the frame rate lows are being generated because of the lockout on that core hitting 100%. And it's pretty obvious that it is one of the harder hit cores, whoop, I missed, of all of them when the game is running. So in particular, once we get to the wee hours of the morning and the mist and the fog and the lights, once there's a full rotation of the assets here in Hogsmeade Court, oh, there we go, some textures popping in. Time of day transitions help. Oh, there we go, it's been hit hard. Good. So it is clearly the hardest hit core. And my frame rate lows right now would be being affected. But again, I've tuned this game to have a very easy time of it by just rendering 30 frames a second. I was actually surprised that I was able to bog the game down so heavily, as if I was running at 4K res or something, 1800 resolution or something high, but not. So if I run out of here, it'll drop the VRAM usage down to like 11 gigabytes. And usually just by running back into town, it tries to then load ahead, the zone ahead, and it can create a bogged down situation. We can certainly see it's being hit somewhat hard. It looks this time around we're sort of keeping on top of it. Oh, here we go, rain. This will be good. So we're going to have a time of day transition. All the lighting should affect things. We should now, once we run down the back alley here and take the shortcut through to the other area of Hogsmeade, I bet you we should be able to bottleneck it. Here we go. Usually it's somewhere around about here. But we're staying on top of it. Okay, my guess is because all the shaders are now generated, we're not having issues. Look, it is true, it's been my solution for this game to get the game to render an area of the game that's tricky, like Hogsmeade, and just let the camera just sit there overnight and render through all the different weather transitions and all the different time of day transitions. Because once the game has built up the pixel shaders as given in any area of the game, it does seem to get on top of it. But the fact is, whatever new thing is going on at a Windows level after this update, I don't doubt it's a Nvidia aspect. There we go. Oh, look, it's peaking out 100% usage on that particular core. But look, it's probably not going to get there now because I've already generated those shaders. But what I would like to show people is that just by preemptingly if I can just come down here, go over to details, sort by CPU usage so that Hogwarts comes up the top, and you should be able to go right click and then, I'm just going to have to move my eyes in on this. If you go set affinity and then set CPU 3 and just turn that off and then go OK and come back over to performance. Right, now what we're going to see is that particular core, this one here that was getting absolutely bogged, it didn't quite get bogged out this time around, but it would have. And if you've been experiencing issues where your game is janking right up, all you need to do is figure out which core it is that's picking out 100%, because my CPU has a fairly easy time of it. I'm basically sitting at half usage. I'm on a 5th gen Intel generation, so by CPU iteration I'm actually quite old. So it's pretty easy for me to peg out my CPU 100%. But what I was noticing is that the current game build was dropping me to frame rates. I mean, I was hitting frame rate lows of 3 and 4 because of this bottleneck. This bottleneck was happening on that core, and that just by forcing the game off that core, I've still got plenty of other cores that can keep up with the game world, and I'm not making any of them render at 100% flat out, and because of that, the bottleneck just isn't going to happen as bad, if at all, once your game is on top of it, as we're kind of seeing here. That being said, I was having to run the game for about half an hour before it was bogging down. I think something to do with the page file or something to do with the assets of game chunks that it's keeping loaded. But yeah, there, it was always on that corner, it would hit the worst, and now it's so much smoother on that corner. So it's something in the back end. I say, for me, it's core 3. I do say just set affinity with the software, get this game off of that. There's several ways to bring it up. As you saw for me, I jumped over to the, I think it's called the Services tab. The Details tab will have all of your programs loaded up. If you sort by CPU loading, Hogwarts is going to be one of the top ones up there. If you right click on it, if you go to set affinity, you untick core 3 and it will just leave it alone. Okay, and you'll find that you'll now distribute whatever workload that the game was going to throw on that core. It'll distribute it to the other cores, which really it shouldn't be anywhere near bogging out. I feel sorry for anyone that might be on a 4-core 8-threaded. You're not going to have this option. Anyone on a 6-core 12-threaded will be obviously with enough free CPU cores to have a fairly easy time of it. What you need to do is whatever's in the background in Windows, which is loading on that core during your game, and it was making it peg out 100%, should now leave it alone. Now that is to say, even after I got the game off that core, running around the game, I was still able, while running this game and basically nothing else, I was still able to get that core to bog out at 100% usage. So it might be something to do with page file management, it might be something to do with an Nvidia, like a hair work or some sort of an aspect of the game, and just moving off that core has definitely kept my frame rates up so much smoother. Here we go, this is the bog down bit. Alright, which core is at 100%? None of them. Oh, yeah, that core, the one I was telling you about. There we go. So it's something to go on in the background of Windows, and it just bogs the game down. But if you force the game off that core already, the time that this drop down happens should be substantially less. Alright, so that's the best way to get control of it, is my take. As you can see, it definitely hit me hard just then. I don't know what it is. I mean, I could do further investigation, but for me what I found is that it was ongoing and it wasn't letting up, and simply forcing the game to no longer run on that core definitely left me with a lot more headroom to run the game smoother. But when I track it with the VRAM usage, I believe it's to do with the page file. I believe it's not keeping the world assets loaded, it's having to regenerate them. One of the ways to get in mediocre performance, or GIMP as I like to affectionately refer, sorry if that's a non-PC term, but it's one that they're now known as Maverick. They've created a studio called Maverick. They're all about getting in mediocre performance on the PC platform, but they were turned 10. They used to de-optimize a Forza Horizon 3 game on the PC. They were basically doing bank level encryption on the textures, and then setting the texture pool on PC to be 1 GB larger than PCs generally had. Didn't catch out the Xboxes because the Xboxes had a dynamic VRAM pool that you could be assigned to be 1 gigabyte larger. So they basically made the Xbox One X run a 9 gigabyte VRAM pool. The Xbox One S was running a 5 gigabyte VRAM pool. Both were 1 gigabyte of VRAM more than most video cards had. And by using a DirectX 12 feature, which is make the texture file one large file, they could actually make it so that on the PC, the decryption, right? I don't know why they would encrypt the textures in the first place, but it's a heavy math function that could bog down a CPU. And whoa, I mean, in this case, I've bogged it down. To the point of shutting down. Okay, well, look, video over. But yeah, shut down your Core 3, and you should be able to get out of trouble. My machine's a little bit old and has bog downs that might be over the top. But look, I'm just going to upload this. Do with it as you will. I'd like to say I could be wrong, but I assure you this is the industry making sure that getting in mediocre performance. And yep, the hardware scheduler for CPUs in Windows 10 hasn't been upgraded for a few years now. So there's ways to load a CPU in ways that Windows 11 might not be quite as bogged down on. It's the only way to make Windows 11 benchmark better than Windows 10 for a gaming ecosystem, when we fully well know that, of course, Windows 10 is a lot more lightweight and has a lot less latency on controllers, etc. It's just a much better operating system for gaming. But using the hardware scheduler not being updated in Win 10, you can create some case scenarios where Windows 11 is shown to perform as a better operating system for gaming. But it is the platform holder, Microsoft. It is and software partners like Warner Brothers, very, very dirty. And the two working together, PC gaming is not good fun. Look, I'm a console gamer now because of antics like this. I've been a PC tech for many, many generations, many decades. And yeah, I mean, I can get around these things, but it's not fun playing with and having to learn ways to do so.